All right, did everybody see it? Recording started.
Thank you, Linda. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll kick off the agenda and then turn it over to you, Karina. So thanks everybody for being here today. We really appreciate it. And thanks to those of you joining online. We've got Karina is going to be doing an introduction, just welcoming everybody. And then we're going to be talking about two updates on two projects that the OOST funded. One is from Will White on trophic modeling of Oregon's nearshore reefs, and the other is Kirsten Grorud-Colbert on juvenile dynamics of key commercial and recreational fisheries. Then we're going to take a break and we're going to pull in Liz Whiteman, who's the executive director of the California Ocean Science Trust. We just signed a memorandum of understanding with that organization, and we're going to be talking about how that came about and some key next steps with us working in partnership with them to advance mutual interests. Then the board is going to do a little bit of a recap from the December 2023 Ocean Science Summit. And we're going to be talking about some of the emerging board priorities as a result of the board workshop that we held just last week or so. And then we're going to pull in Shannon Brown, who's on contract with us to assist us with fundraising and fund development in the state of Oregon. Then we're also pulling in the other part of the True Wind Collaborative team, and they're going to give us an update on some of the OOST communications that they've been doing. And we've got a 10-minute public comment period for anybody that wants to make comments, and then any closing remarks. So I'll turn it over to Karina.
Okay. Welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. I'm sorry we don't have Laura with us today, but I think she's having an enjoyable time wherever she is. And I think for new members of the board may not realize, but right before we ended last year, we did elect a vice chair position, which doesn't necessarily appear in our sort of guidelines or statute, but for occasions when Laura can't be here, it's nice to have the backup person to lead the meeting. So somehow I got elected. So you're stuck with me now. Let's see, many of you were with us about 2 weeks ago when we had our workshop meeting. But just to recap that was very fruitful, gave the board, new board members a chance to get to know each other a little bit better, talk about some of the high level priorities that we see for the OOST going forward. We'll talk a little bit about that, but also try to integrate the findings from the research summit that we had into our sort of vision, strategic next steps, etc. Those are not solidified totally yet in a formal sense. So we'll have a little more conversation about that, but will be presented later. So I just wanted to give people a sense of where we are on that. I am supposed to ask before we go to this, I'd like to go around the room and just get everybody brief introductions, and if board members have any minor updates, I'd like to just handle them now. I think since we just met 2 weeks ago, probably not, but I wanted to give that opportunity. So maybe we'll start with the folks online. Keith, were you prepared to just introduce yourself, and if there's a brief update, feel free.
I am. Good afternoon, everybody. Keith Wolf. I'm with NOAA Fisheries, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I'm here in Portland today, joining. And I don't have any updates from the meeting we had in Newport a couple of weeks ago, other than to say it was a good wrap up of the science summary, and it really afforded us the opportunity to dig back into all of the input that we received, public, from the universities, from everyone, and really begin to meld and mesh that into our strategic plans and our processes. So I'm really appreciative of all those people who provided that input and all the other board members for their time and efforts. But that's all I have for myself.
Great, thank you so much, Keith. Let's see, Kristen, would you like to say hi?
Kristen Dawn, and I'm one of the OOST board members, not affiliated with anyone or anything.
Okay. I'm glad to have you here, but past affiliations.
Dick Anderson, state senator, primarily district is the coast.
Great to have you here. Ted.
Ted DeWitt, OOST board member, also unaffiliated now, used to be with the Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, and just for formality's sake, Karina Nielsen, I'm currently director of the Oregon Sea Grant Program and I'm a member of the board as well. We have some other folks in the room with us and online. Can we go around and do that? I think we have a small enough group that would be nice to know who's here. We have our two speakers here. I think we'll do introductions when they speak. So Kristen and we'll come back to you in a minute. Let's see, Brad, you wanna?
Brad Bailey, urchin harvesting and kelp restoration from Mooney Sea Ranch.
Good to have you here. Alex, I know these people, so.
Yeah, Alex Avila, I am Oregon Sea Grant Coastal Resilience Adaptation Fellow, and I'm here to learn.
Welcome. And online, let's see, can you handle our online?
Nadia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Nadia Gardner. I'm a consultant with the Oregon Ocean Conservation Fund at Oregon Community Foundation.
Thanks, Nadia. And Tabitha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tabitha Rood. I'm the new Science and Policy Director for the Alaka Alliance. Just listening in today, trying to get integrated with some of the other ocean conservancy groups. And I'm based out of Gold Beach, Oregon. Nice to meet you all.
Great.
Welcome.
Welcome and nice to meet you as well. And I think that is it with the exception of Linda, who is our great assistant with Department of State Lands that's running the Zoom portion of this meeting for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our order of business in this initial part is also to approve the prior meeting summary, which you should have gotten in your materials. So any want to call the motion for that? Board members?
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll move to approve the minutes.
okay.
I'll second.
Second. With that, I guess any comments, edits, anything? All in favor of approving the meeting summary?
Aye.
Okay, so moved, so approved.
So moved and so approved.
Okay. Business item 1 done. Yeah. Okay, it is, I think we're a little early, but that's fine. We're gonna move on to our presentations. We're very, very happy to have both Will White and Kristen. Just the name out. Kirsten. Oh, okay. My apologies, but we have two presentations based on two of our funded investigators. We're very pleased to hear from them, and we're gonna
I think I might have lost sound. I'm hopefully not the only one.
Yeah, I lost sound too. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Sure. We may have to leave and come back in. Give folks a second here to respond. Well, nothing back on the chat. So for those folks on the line who can hear me, it looks like we probably should go ahead and drop off and dig back in, and we'll see if that clears up the issue before our speakers start.
Good call. We'll try that.
See you back on here.
I
Sorry
actually
about
did.
that.
I actually did it, and it didn't help.
Oh,
Oh, no.
well, Let me make a call. Lisa says we're back.
They have to unmute.
Okay, can you guys
Oh.
hear us?
Start the video.
All right,
Start.
Now we can. Thank you.
all right, hang on, everybody.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience. We're getting a shared screen up.
Okay, here we go.
All right. I'm not sure that everybody heard the introduction, but we got Will White here talking to us about trophic modeling of Oregon's nearshore reefs, and it looks like he's got some I'll let you co-authors.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making time for me to sort of chat to you a little bit. Yes, this is a grant that was funded last year, and I do want to acknowledge my co-PIs on this grant. Mark Novak, who's a professor over in integrative biology, kelp forest ecologist and theoretical ecologist, and Lee Rasmussen, who works for ODFW. Joining our team is also a new graduate student, Andres Pino Sanchez, who comes to us from Ecuador, actually. Okay, so just to give an overview of what we're hoping to accomplish with this project, these are the key questions that we're trying to address, all thinking about the way the kelp forest, rocky reef, nearshore food webs interact and will respond to different types of management interventions and environmental forcing, right? So, for example, how will kelp forests respond to urchin culling? How would different types of kelp restoration efforts affect sea urchin and red abalone populations? How would otter reintroduction affect all those different elements of the food web? And how are those interactions affected by regional differences in oceanography and bathymetry along the Oregon coast? And how can we use that information to select different physical indicators for where and when kelp restoration activities are most likely to succeed? Okay. We're taking a modeling approach to this, aggregating existing studies and existing data on interactions in this food web in order to simulate different possible management interventions. And so our expected outcomes, what we're hoping to get out of this, are the predicted consequences of different management actions under different environmental contexts and geographical locations. And we don't think that with this 1-2-year project with one graduate student, we're going to answer all those questions definitively. But what we do hope to do is identify what are some of the key uncertainties that would lead to recommendations for future science and future data collection, future monitoring by ODFW or other collaborators. 2 years is also a really short amount of time to even assemble something this complex. And so the approach we're taking is to not reinvent the wheel and to build off other work that's already ongoing or already completed. So for example, I have another set of projects that's funded by the California Ocean Protection Council and the Packard Foundation that's looking at similar questions about kelp restoration, kelp urchin food web interactions down in California kelp forests. And so that work is already underway. And my research associate, Jess Hopf, is leading the modeling work on that. And she's developed a stage-structured, spatially explicit model of kelp urchin interactions that include all the different processes we think are important to kelp forest ecology. This is based on giant kelp, so we'll be adapting that for our bull kelps here in Oregon, right? But the idea is that we have the effect of urchin behaviors, so they can either be hiding in crevices, feeding on drift, or if drift kelp becomes less available because kelp has become depleted, urchins change behavior and can form fronts that then overgraze the kelp. And then the kelp have their own interactions with adult kelp shading out juvenile kelp and the typical life cycle of these organisms. So we have a lot of this work already sort of fleshed out based on prior publications by one of Mark Novak's students and other work that we have. So that's all moving forward. The other key aspect of this that's really nice is that based on this project, we have a collaboration with Christy Croker and some other scientists down at UC Santa Cruz who've been doing experiments to see how kelp and urchins respond to different types of ocean stressors. So how they respond to heating. You know, urchins are invertebrates, and so when things get hot, their metabolism speeds up and they start feeding more, right? As well as how they respond to stressors like ocean acidification or low oxygen. And so we have all that information. How will changing those environmental conditions sort of turn the dials in the system, and we can simulate different types of stresses like heat waves or changes in upwelling patterns that we might see up and down the coast, to understand how that's likely to affect this food web. We're also interested in having a piece of this analysis having to do with sea otters, and luckily work that I believe the Alaka Alliance funded. Tim Tinker, who's down at UC, down in Santa Cruz, has already built an otter population model and made forecasts for the likely population density and distribution of otters along the coast if reintroduction were to happen. And so we don't need to reinvent an otter model. We can just take Tim's results. It turns out that Mark Novak was actually was a postdoc with Tim Tinker, so there's a working relationship there already. So we can look up and down the coast, and what we've proposed to do is select 3 locations along the coast, 3 different reefs, where we have differences in upwelling patterns and differences in bathymetry and coastal topography, and use that as sort of our 3 different case studies to understand how different places along the coast would respond differently to the presence of otters. You're going to have likely different otter densities at those locations if we had reintroduction. And then the last piece of the model is the Dungeness crabs, because we're interested in how sea otters would feed both on urchins and abalones and on Dungeness crab. And so we have a population model for the crabs that include the important time lags and fishery dynamics of the crabs. And that's all work that I've been working on for the past decade or so with Lou Botsford and Alan Hastings down at UC Davis. We have a chapter in the textbook that we wrote that's all about those types of interactions. So we're going to be pulling all those pieces together to simulate some of these different management outcomes. Now, it turns out that in terms of the timeline of this project so far, as often happens when you design a project that's going to be primarily done by a graduate student, there's delays in recruiting the right graduate student for the project. And so when we were notified of the funding, we had a student we were recruiting. You can imagine it's difficult to find students who are both ecologists but have the mathematical background to do some of this complex modeling. And that student fell through, and luckily I was contacted by Andres, who was completing his bachelor's degree down in Ecuador, and we've got him coming online, but bringing in international students, there's delays involved in that. So he started work on Monday, and so that's where we are. Luckily, prior to that, we've been meeting with Andres periodically, and he's been doing a lot of background reading. So he's ready to hit the ground running. He knows the material, he knows the system, and he has a lot of the sort of coding talents that he needs to have to get rolling with this. So we will be leaping into action, and one of the first things that we're going to be doing, that Andres will be leading the effort on, is meeting with some of the kelp restoration groups, meeting with Orca and urchin fishermen down at Port Orford to sort of introduce ourselves and get some ideas of scoping for some of the different interventions we want to think about. That's usually the way we start these projects. We already have Leaf on board with ODFW, so we have ODFW's perspective on this. And yeah, so that's where we are. And I think hopefully at the next board meeting, we'll have some of his initial results to present. So thanks very much.
We have time for questions. I think I'll open up to the board members.
The delightful buzzing.
It's I think it's the heating system. It's the vent that went off a little while ago. I was hoping it would stay off. I don't know how to control it. I apologize.
Will, I have a question.
Yeah.
In terms of those locations, Otter Rock
Mhm.
and further south, those were based on the modeling that was done that indicated those would be the higher priority sites where we would likely have success with otter reintroduction. Is that the case?
If memory serves, the RFP specifically was interested in road reef and things that would be happening there. And so we targeted that, and then we tried to think of locations that would differ somewhat in bathymetry. So the main reason that bathymetry is interesting is because the otters are limited in the depth they can hunt, right? And so that's going to affect their predation on other species. And then the other difference between sort of north and south of Cape Blanco is differences in the upwelling regime and how that's going to affect kelp dynamics, because we expect to have really different nutrient profiles of those locations that will affect the kelp. And
You change the view to presentation view, so it's bigger, easier for us to view your slides.
Interesting. That's what it was. That's what it looks like for me. But
It started out that way and then it changed to that. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt during your presentation. Thank you.
Let me see what I can do. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's you or Lisa, which one, because we're seeing Lisa's screen.
That's right. Yeah, we're presenting off of Lisa's computer here.
But it's also presenting over there.
There you go. That's better.
Oh, okay.
Now we're seeing.
Yeah,
Now I don't have any notes, so I'm not revealing any secrets here.
yeah, it's hard to do both online and the screen
Yeah.
at the same time, with presenter mode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Activated, so.
This is Keith. I've got a question for Will. Will, in terms of the historical baseline that you're looking at, maybe in your modeling and in the study, how far back are you going to what condition are you setting the model and looking back on?
That's a great question. So we're not making an effort to fit to historical data necessarily. More asking under different sort of states of nature, what would be the outcome of different management actions? So we could say, if we had a full and healthy kelp forest, what would happen under these different scenarios? Or if we start in a degraded kelp forest state, what would happen if you undertook different restoration actions under different scenarios?
So what would we base the full and healthy population at? What would that be?
We would probably, we haven't made a decision about that exactly yet. I think we would, and in the work we do in California, we have Landsat data that we can go back and base that on, and that's more difficult with the bull kelp. So I think we'll be looking at some of the, probably some of the survey data we have from the Marine Reserves Program, and also, I'm not sure of a data source for that.
Isn't there ability to do some Landsat work with bull kelp?
It doesn't show up as well.
Okay, is it, I know it doesn't show up as well, but
Yes.
is the Oregon versus California version of that also problematic, the Cape Blanco?
Yeah, so I know that Tom Bell is working on that. So Tom Bell is our collaborator who does all the remote sensing Landsat work.
Yeah.
And so he's sort of an affiliated collaborator in this. And so we'll be working with him to pull some of the Landsat data as best we can to get that.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to be able to look at this in terms of change, because we are in a changing environment, and it's going to be important for us, I think, in any of these kinds of studies to look back or to be able to say we're looking at what's changing and what has changed and to what degree, and to be able to look forward and say things like what are the limiting factors and what are the constituent pressures on these populations. And if it's things like ocean heat, then that's going to be easy to take a look at, or acidification or anoxia, those types of things that would drive wasting disease, those kinds of things, and be able to say, here's where we have been, here's what a healthy population looks like in a healthy environment in terms of carrying capacity, et cetera. Here's where we are in the 2022, 3, 4 period, but using other modeling and looking at what's predicted for the future, I think provides us opportunities to look at what the effects of those current pressures are and what we can expect to happen in the future, so that we can really begin to focus on what are the types of things that we need to pay close attention to in terms of decision makers and change and recommendations about the impacts to the local communities, fisheries, and certainly to the environment.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. The work that we're doing in California has a component where there exists a downscaled climate forecast model for the nearshoring California. And so we can include those different, the expected changes in the frequency of hypoxic events or heat waves and things like that. That model domain doesn't extend all the way up to Oregon for those type of forecasts, or at least it doesn't yet. And so our hope is that we're going to set up the modeling tools that could then, in the next few years, make those kind of forecasts more realistic with those downscale predictions.
Thanks, Will. That's a great response. Appreciate it.
But what sort of data would be helpful for feeding that model, like especially maybe some long-term monitoring data would be really important for that?
I mean, long-term monitoring data is always great. I think physical instrumentation is really important as well. You know, we have a few sort of data sources for that at, you know, Cape Perpetua and here in the Newport line. But once you get into that world of having downscaled models, you need to validate them. And what we're finding is that that type of work works well in some parts of the West Coast of the US and not as well in others. So there's good matches typically in Central California, but less so in Southern California, where you have like narrower shelves and islands and things like that.
And how are you validating that? Like what sort of?
So they do, this is not work I do, I should say, but the people who do this make model projections of things like salinity and sea surface height and pH, and
So then they just go out
and then
and
they
work those
they just go out and
parameters.
match that to like buoy data and things like that.
I mean, it's interesting because we had this conversation about sort of long-term monitoring and sort of the importance of it prior workshop and
Right.
sort of, you know, so the connection between what we're learning from the research, I think, and what are the most important, and it's just interesting to consider what are the key things that would
Yes.
help
Yeah.
advance the science and the
And
management around
It's
this.
one of these things where a lot of the work, a lot of the tools that we have access to now are these remote sensing tools that are great and free to us because somebody else has paid for them. But their accuracy depends on all this in the water validation, the ground truthing. And so that
Yeah.
long-term data is really essential for the ground truthing.
So maybe that's an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about that of maybe relying on models, but putting more money into ground truthing,
Mhm.
checking those models and which maybe that's cheaper than having like the long-term monitoring, right?
Right. Targeting
Right.
it for the ground truthing is important.
Right.
And, you know, especially places like Oregon where it's harder to get in the water. You know?
Right.
Yeah, but that's really important to like these Landsat efforts is to know.
Okay.
what's going on.
Any other questions?
At least it looks like.
I
this.
just put two things in the chat. I don't know if anyone's monitoring this, but just the orca status of the kelp report that's planning to come out this June. I'm wondering if you're incorporating those scuba surveys. And then, yeah, I'd just love to have a follow up with you guys on when you're planning to do outreach in South Coast.
Did we lose audio again?
I'm worried I might have just broken it.
Well, I'll type a message in here again, so
Thank you, Keith.
no problem. It looks like when they switch in the presentation, we're losing. So yeah, I just got an email from Karina said we're getting back online soon. So hang in there with me, Tabitha, and hang in there with us.
No worries. I'll be patient.
Thanks. We're standing by. That's what I'll say.
Well, Keith, are you aware of Orca's status of the kelp report?
I was just going to ask you because I also do documentary films, and one of the films we're doing is we're going up the coast, and one of the episodes, full episodes, hour-long episode, is about the loss of kelp. And so, I'm interested in anything. And ORKA, Oregon Kelp
Oregon
Alliance.
Kelp Alliance, yeah.
Yeah, I know who they are, and I've also talked to NOAA folks about the NOAA kelp restoration programs. And so, part of my job is to make sure we match up those, we do some edge match when that is. So, yeah, I definitely would love to see that June report and
Yeah,
incorporate
there'll
that
be
in.
the updated status of the kelp, and then this a kelp stewardship plan, which is kind of
Okay.
a 3 to 5 year stewardship recommendations for enhancing kelp, culling urchins, and predator reintroduction. Mostly focused on Pycnopodia, but sea otters are a small section too.
Is got orca.org. Is there a site that you
I
can?
think it's OregonKelp.org. I'll find the link and drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I think I've been there. Thank you. I appreciate that, and appreciate that heads up too.
And remind me, I missed your introduction. Are you with NOAA or you're on the board? What?
I am with NOAA, and I'm on the board. I'm a board member.
Great. All right.
And
Cool.
I sit on a number of science on climate science teams. So climate science is really what I do, and the things that we talk about are affected all by climate change. And so I want to make sure we are always drawing that in.
Yeah. Well, if you wouldn't mind putting your email in the chat, I would love to chat with
Yeah,
you more.
happy to do it. Happy to do it.
Are you up in Portland area as well?
I am.
Okay, great.
I'm from Seattle, but I did so much work down here over my career that it was like maybe I should just move down here.
Well, maybe our paths crossed when I used to work at Bonneville Power Administration 5 years ago or so, in their fish and wildlife.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
small
did
world.
Northwest. Yeah, I did Northwest Power and Conservation Council for about 16 years, representing the tribes in the state of Washington.
Wow. I
Yeah.
was going to say
I,
how.
I,
If you're representing the tribes, then I understand.
yeah, I rode the train back and forth, and I did my PhD on the train. It's great.
That's awesome.
Oh, it's great.
I wish that
7
could
hours.
happen everywhere.
7 hours of uninterrupted work rather than 7 hours of driving where you can't do any work.
Yep.
And no, I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Well, you think they went to the next speaker already?
I hope not. Well, I think we would have seen the presentation. I think that they're messing with the stuff. I haven't got another email yet. So where are you located at?
I'm in Gold Beach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I took a job with the
One of my
Forest Service
favorites.
down there, down here, probably 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just decided I wanted to do something different for a little bit, take a break from the federal government. No offense.
No, it's okay. I'm looking for a break too.
Yeah. Sometimes you need people from the outside to really help move things along too.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to do a pretty broad, set of jobs within private industry, consulting firms, state government, tribal government, and federal government, and no NGOs yet. But that's next maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you're really an expert in climate science, I know that's something we're really trying to quantify is the whole blue economy, blue carbon effects
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
restored
it's really
kelp
important.
forests. So
This is one of my comments as we build our strategic plan is defining what are we talking about when we talk about Oregon Ocean. And my pitch is to make sure we talk about nearshore and intertidal marsh blue carbon areas because they're so
yeah,
very important to protect and to know and to make the community, the public aware of as well of their importance and really do protect those as we these are the nature-based approaches for dealing with greenhouse gases, and we'll throw some technology at it and hopefully that'll do something, but that's tactical.
yep,
Strategic is emissions lowering, but and again why we're doing that, we need to protect those natural systems that are carbon sinks and sequestration to the maximum. I sit on a working group and I'm also on the OHA board, or council, Oregon Hypoxia and Acidification Council,
Oh, wow.
through ODFW, and they're connected to OOST and the NOAA, and at the national level and now local level from the West Coast here, the marine carbon removal projects. So a lot of technology and a lot of strategies, a lot of research being conducted about how do we and what can we do in the ocean with carbon. And a lot of those, the far-flung kind of ideas, and we're back in the days of desalination plants, but desalination plants are now all over the world, and they provide drinking water to people who would not normally have it. And in the kind of environment that we're in with climate change, those tactical solutions, those technical innovations, what the scientists now call geoengineering today, that's what they're calling it, are necessary. We have to pursue those things while we pursue the policy on emissions.
Yeah.
It's all hands on deck.
Hey, we got a presentation.
Keith, we owe you, buddy. We owe you big time.
We're having a whole separate side conversation.
Yeah,
here.
we're just having a discussion. I don't know if you guys can hear it, great.
Oh, no, we can.
Okay, good.
I apologize if I broke it by asking my question, but.
So just so you guys know, we keep getting booted off of the internet. So
We changed
it, so we don't think that's gonna happen anymore.
In case.
Now it says screen sharing is paused. Let's try that again.
Well, maybe it's because I think it's okay.
Showing up for us.
Yeah, it just means someone
And do they have it full screen? Do you have it full screen?
Do you have it full screen?
It looks like it's a PDF, so yeah.
Okay, great. Well, it is my pleasure, and relief.
What you do?
To introduce our next speaker, Kirsten, not Christian, Kirsten. Oh, thank you. I apologize.
AGC.
And now you're gonna see if I get the last name right. Gorud Colbert.
Very close. Grow.
Group. Okay, thank you. And apologies for messing up your name. My bad. The title of her presentation is The Missing Link: Quantifying Juvenile Dynamics of Key Commercially, Recreationally, and Culturally Important Fishes Along Oregon's Near Shore. Look forward to hearing what you're learning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and super happy to be here in person, sharing it, but also hi to everyone online. So I want to acknowledge my co-PI, Sue Spinagle. We're both professors in the integrative biology department at OSU. We have many collaborators on this project. Lindsay Aylesworth and her Marine Reserves team at ODF&W, Allie Whitman and the Marine Resources at ODF&W, Jim Burke, who's at Oregon Coast Aquarium, Kathleen O'Malley, who is the State Marine Fisheries Geneticist with ODF&W and also at OSU, and Tom Calvanese, who is the director of the Port Orford Field Station down south. And we have a grad student supported on this project, Cameron Royer, and you'll see his picture in a little while. So I'm super happy that Will and I get to talk on the same day and time, because there's a lot of crossover and crossover in the work that we're doing. For us, our focus is very strongly on ground fish in Oregon, and we're all familiar on the realities, particularly because our nearshore fisheries here in Oregon are data poor. We have more of a focus on our offshore fisheries of necessity and also availability of data. But there's a lot happening in the Oregon nearshore, and you can see that landings have changed very dramatically over time. And also, this is really related to our spawning stock biomass of these species. Here, we're looking at the West Coast commercial groundfish and how things have changed over time. So there's a lot that we need to know to manage these fisheries well.
Lisa, we're not seeing the changes in the pages here.
Oh, maybe that's the pause. Okay, sorry about that. Let's figure it out.
Maybe stop share and restart. There you go.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna reshare. Okay, so now, there you go. How about that?
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so here's a pretty picture. And here we're looking at trends over time. And so our work is really focused on this crucial connection, long-standing understanding in fisheries science and management about the link between recruitment, so what's happening during the early life of the fish that are fished, and then what happens when they become spawners, and really the basis of how we manage our fisheries and project into the future. And so what I just wanted to show you here is to look at these peaks, right? This is a recruitment, so the juveniles coming in red. A peak happens for juveniles, and a couple years later, peak happens in spawners. So we're following, and look here, we're following over time the fishery. And that link between them is crucial because fish have this great life cycle, but complex, because after they're dispersing in the ocean as larvae, they need to find a place to be. And our nearshore fish species settle to our kelp forests, to our nearshore rocky reefs. And this crucial point before they then settle to the benthos on the bottom and recruit to the fisheries is what we call kind of this bottleneck in fisheries, because a lot of what happens here leads to a huge decrease in numbers here, but then successful adults later here. So that's the work that we're doing. And because all of this is so ecosystem related, we're bringing in a lot of oceanographic variability and conditions to understand what's happening to these species during their early life and then furthermore into the fishery. So this is the SMRF project, and this is what we do. We are working together to understand the juvenile dynamics of a range of different species. And thank you for reading it all off, Karina. We've added culturally, actually, because we are beginning to understand through the research of others how important these species are also to communities along our coast, including indigenous communities, and how some of these species for thousands of years have sustained those communities. So here are all the players. Jim Burke from the aquarium, Tom Tavernese, Sue, Lindsay Elworth, and her team, Dave Lacey. So we're working with community partners. Also, these 4 grad students on the left have been working with us over the years, and we've had more than 40 undergrads work with us as well. And even Alex's work was related to this as well. So we're one big family. And why do we call ourselves the SMRF Project? Well, it really comes down to this little tool you see right here. SMRF stands for the Standard Monitoring Unit for the Recruitment of Fishes. We did not come up with the acronym. This happens also in Southern California and Central California. And we brought it to Oregon in 2011. So you can tell this funding is helping support something that's ongoing as well as some new stuff. And so what this is basically a bag of sequencing that fish like to settle to as they're coming in during that really crucial time. And then we can go every 2 weeks between April and September and collect everything that's settled and learn about what species are coming in, and we save the samples so we can also look at their age and growth and other aspects of their life. Okay, so these are the different groups that we tend to get. And we also get kind of, a full smattering of different species settle into these. But I really want to focus on these 5 species or groups of species because we get them frequently. And you'll notice that some tiger rockfish, cabezon, we can identify the species. Some we're grouping. So this is olive yellowtail, black blue rockfishes. UGBCC is quillback, gopher, black and yellow, copper, and china. And basically that's because when we collect them and use all the characteristics that we possibly can just visually, we cannot identify them as species, so they all get grouped. Okay, so what does this look like over our years? So I'll say that this is a long-term time series, but not one that's been traditionally funded by a single source of support. So it takes a village to keep this running. But we now have 12 years of data, which we're really proud of as a consortium. And here is some of the variability that we're seeing. So you can see different species are coming in different years, in different magnitudes. We sample sites in the Central Coast and South Coast. You also see differences there. So we have some big years, like for here, the GBCC, and here for OITB, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But we don't manage our fisheries this way. We don't lump all the species together. We really need a single species approach to be able to manage these species as adults into the future. And so that's what part of what this OOST funding is supporting us to do. So we have a new collaboration with Kathleen O'Malley, and this is Cameron, our grad student. And what I'm showing here, these are not our data. These are data from Diana Bacher and Carlos Garza. Carlos is at UC Santa Cruz and Diana Mathis is on. But essentially, in the past, what you had to do when you wanted to ID a species genetically, you had to choose your species, let's say black, and then you had to take all your samples and say, is this one a black? Yes. Is this one black? No. Is this one? And so on. What this allows us to do, and this just came out last year, so it's super great timing for us, is to use this method and actually look across 54 different species, throw everything in, and then each sample is evaluated against all of it. So we have this great new opportunity to take all these years of data and sample and get it to a place where it's useful for our fisheries management. And that's very relevant because we have 3 stock assessments that we're contributing to as a result. So black happened last year, and we've already shared data with the STAR panel for that. And we have 2 upcoming and in progress, yellowtail and quillback rockfishes. So once we're able to split these out into species, which we now can as a result of this for black and yellowtail, here's an example of the kind of things that we're learning. So group together, black, yellow. You can see that sometimes it's a big year for both, like 2021. But look at 2019. Many more black than yellowtail, and before we were just grouping them together. And then look at 2023. This has been the biggest year so far that we've sampled in our 12 years for recruitment of this group. And so we're in the middle of IDing those right now to see what's going on.
And Kristen, this is one central and south coast.
Yeah, this is So, oops. So black and yellowtail at a minimum have different dynamics, and that's going to mean different year class strengths moving down the line for the years in the future. Okay, so here's where we're headed. Once we have these species-specific data, we're also better able to understand how our changing ocean is impacting these species and these stocks. So this is a paper that came out from us last year. And this is looking at black rockfish dynamics. So we were ready to share the data for the 2023 assessment because we have been working on it, and it's synergized with this support for BOOST. And essentially, you don't need to worry too much about the ups and the downs and what's what, but just to focus in here, in 2014 to 2016, we had a heat wave in our region. And it had huge effects that we're just kind of starting and continuing to understand. For us and our Smurf samples and the black rockfish samples, what we saw is that in that year, sorry for the axis, but this is 2015, there was much higher growth. This is black rockfish larval growth. It increased, which seems great. We're gonna have bigger fish, and when they're larvae, they actually settle faster because they're big enough to settle. But what we found is that there wasn't sufficient prey because of all these ecosystem dynamics. And so that year there was reduced survival and not as much recruitment. And that's going to scale up to the fishery as well. So interesting things ahead that we can do once we know what these individual species are doing. Okay, so here's our milestones. I just wanted to share quickly in closing that our first milestone was to compile the black rockfish data from Smurfing for the STAR panel and the stock assessment, which we did. We're continuing to collaborate to do the field work and collect the samples. We were successful last year, and we're just getting ready for our second field season with this support. To genetically identify the species, we are basically almost done with yellowtail. Quillback is a different process in this new panel. It turns out when you start sampling 13 years ago, you may not know exactly how you're supposed to preserve your samples, so you can use cutting edge genetic techniques. So Kathleen and her team are working with us to get the best kind of genetic data from the samples that we have. So Quillback will be fairly soon, and then we're also working up all these more extended analyses so that we can provide data for the stock assessments and also do some outreach and share with our community partners and others the types of data that we've been collecting. So that's it. Thanks so much for your support. I'm really happy to discuss with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Open the floor for questions from folks.
I don't have a question, I have a
Comment.
Ooh, yeah,
Remarks from the
Yes.
board.
I mean, I am biased because I've been following in a small part of this project
you've been
since the beginning.
integral.
But this is one of those projects where, so Chris made the comment that it's always like piecemealing money together for this,
Yeah.
but it is so important. It's organ data, juvenile data that's being used in stock assessments. And this is on multiple grant applications where we wrote, the comment was the state should fund this. And so to me, I love that OOST put money towards this because in my mind, this is exactly the type of, there's a gap. It's so important for Oregonians and to our fisheries and our communities. To me, it's like a no-brainer. So, and I just want to make that comment again, I am a bit biased because I've been a fan of this project forever and I'm
But-
so glad.
But you also have knowledge and understanding that's important to contribute to this conversation. So I just, I don't wanna like say that it's just like that you're biased. I think you actually bring the insider knowledge to how the data are used, where the gaps are and why it's so important. So
And I think something learning, is working with the stock assessors
Yeah.
to make sure the data is actually usable. That took a while, I think, to really work out and build that relationship. So again, encouraging, those collecting the data to work with the managers and the people doing this. Anyway, it's a process.
It's true. And we had to have a key number of years beforehand so we could actually, also show and collectively understand the value of these kind of data. We do a lot of research there. So ODF and W Vessel, grad student and undergrad, aquariums and aquarium platform too. So
Oh,
Go ahead.
if I can, milestone 7,
Yeah.
down the road a bit, but, it comes to mind marine reserves.
Yeah.
And, hot topic has been in the legislature for that session. Got it funded. Can you make the connection for me, near shore marine reserves, to non-science person? Nice research, but talk to me about how does marine reserves intersect in all this stuff? Is that another word for near shore? And that's where you're doing your research.
Yeah.
If so, then I think there's a real opportunity right now, because we funded to get communication back out to
Yeah.
communities about the benefits of marine reserves. So I like what you did just done and showing and potential, but, the variety of communities on the coast, not just the people communities or the cities.
Yeah.
But all need to hear more about the benefits. I'm encouraged if I'm on the right track here,
yeah.
so that I can continue to beat the drum of the benefits. But am I on the right? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. So in fact, 2011, when we started this, was because it was just before Otter Rock and Redfish Rocks Marine Reserves went into place. So we have before and after data. And I didn't show the map of our sampling sites today, but they're inside and outside Redfish Rocks, inside and outside Otter Rock. So we have an entire analysis that's Marine Reserve focused. And it looks at, differences over time. We don't expect that we're gonna be able to capture it all, right? Because these are long-lived species and their recruitment is highly variable. But at a minimum, we can say that the marine reserves are protecting important habitat for these species as juveniles. And they are settling there, they're surviving there, and then some of them are moving offshore to fisheries afterwards, some are staying there for nearshore fisheries. So in that sense, the marine reserves narrative of this is also a very important.
And I mean, because there are also long-term monitoring spots, that's why it was easy to piggyback this type of monitoring onto that.
Yeah, right. So we should say on the nearshore data side of things, these marks also have sensors on them. They have salinity, they have temperature, they have DO. And so I'm not aware, ODFW has 2 other moorings, 3, 4 maybe. They have other moorings and other marine reserve locations. We have multiplicative ones in each of these 2 reserves. And so we have near shore, very fine scale data for those types of ocean conditions.
And I think as Will was, I mean, one of the things about the ground truthing and in the water measurements is that band that's very close to shore where the habitat is hard to measure from some of the remote sensing technologies, and it's different. Sufficiently enough that this is really like a gap fill that's important. Well, I don't know if you wanted to.
Well, I was just gonna add that just as you're working to inform stock assessments, it can inform marine reserve assessments as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we've done some work along those lines, using Earth data to show, it helps you predict when you expect to see peaks in the fish abundance.
I think, Senator Anderson, you had another question about the equivalence, difference, similarity between marine reserves and near shore and what those 2 phrases are. Was that?
Yeah.
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 Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. So our marine reserves are in the near shore. And these data kind of do double duty because of that. They're near shore data. And they're also focused on marine reserve placement and what's happening in those areas. And those 2 marine reserves especially are really prime settlement habitat. I mean, basically that's what we've learned.
And only 2 in Kelp. Well, the only 2 reserves for Kelp.
Yeah, that's true.
So the reserves are within the near shore.
Right.
They can be representative of sites that are, have protections.
Yep.
But they do not cover, they're not the same thing, I guess. You know, the near shore is a sort of larger zones, and these would be.
Right.
Sort of,
Yeah.
I guess my only point is, and I don't know where this communication goes, but I would encourage you, whenever you're talking to people other than PhDs, you research guys, that you bring in the Marine Reserve vernacular and the importance of it. It would help me and legislation to get more money to continue these kind of things, because I think it gets lost with the citizenry.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's super helpful.
Mhm.
I'm doing a little time
Yeah.
check now. Lisa, are you helping me?
Yeah,
Well,
I am.
think we have to wrap up. Should we just see if there's one online question?
Yeah, Keith.
Keith, yeah,
Oh, Keith.
yeah.
Great. Hi, Keith.
Keith, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I think you may have answered, or I think I may have intuited here, but I'm looking for at what point that we do exploitation rate and how we bring that in. And either that's in milestone 1, perhaps, if it's being collected and submitted to ODFW, because I know that they would do that. They would bring in seasons, bag limits, size limitations, those kinds of regulatory constraints on exploitation. But then also, does it perhaps also happen in milestone 5 where you're beginning to collect fish length data? And if you're doing that, are you doing, and really the key would be catch per unit effort as well, knowing how much effort is expended to catch a fish. And if that CPUE is high or is low, then there's few fish, and we're working harder to bring those fish to market. And that certainly gives us some indication of how to manage the fishery.
Mhm. Okay, Keith, thank you so much. You were cutting in and out a little bit, but I think I have the gist. But please correct me if I'm missing a key part of what you were saying. So that part, basically scaling these data from this level to that important decision making that you were just talking about, right? With CPUE, with like how is effort intersecting with this? So yes, it's very much milestone 1. And so I didn't show any of our length related data today or any of our juvenile age and growth characteristics, but we have those data too. So those are going into, and then we let the STAR panel and Allie and Leaf and their teams, run with it. So that will happen there. And then also in 5, oh yes, I see your point. Yeah, basically what's happened in 5 has already happened for Black, and it will be happening for Quillback and Yellowtail very shortly.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay. I think we are a little bit late now on our break, but we're gonna break. And then we have to come back at pretty time certain. I think for Liz, right? Or
We'll come back at 1:15.
1:15, okay.
No,
Yeah.
Liz, no.
Okay, Liz will hang for us online. She tunes in early, so we'll come back at 1:15.
And I've made arrangements for all future meetings to be over in that.
Notice of deciding to meet here, so we apologize. So,
Yeah,
they were very busy today on the campus.
They've got
so,
a big set of meetings and they've taken up all the conference rooms. So guys, we'll be back at
1:15.
1:15.
Okay, I did not press this.
Welcome, Liz. Can you hear us?
I can. Thank you for the invitation to join.
Okay,
Good.
great. I think we have everybody back in the room who wants to be here. Sorry, we don't have the camera on in the room, Liz. It's a small group of board members and a couple of members from the public aside from, just for context.
Okay, thank you.
With, so welcome back, everyone. I'm gonna let Liz kick us off a little bit, Lisa kick us off a little bit with some background, but the item that we're talking about is progress on a relationship with the California Ocean Science Trust, which is a sister organization that has certainly it's larger, been around longer, more mature than Oregon Ocean Science Trust in some ways, but we have similar purpose and mission and interests. So we, the board met with Liz and Liz, Laura, and Lisa have cooked up an MOU, which we mentioned before, but maybe I'll ask Lisa to just describe. I mean, it doesn't say much other than that we agree to work together, collaborate on some things, and it's not binding in any particularly big way, but it's a very nice document to have to talk about our work together. And then as part of a first project, we have recently developed an agreement to collaboratively pursue some opportunities with a contractor to look at funding and opportunities federally. So I think what I'm going to do is pass it to Lisa, who's a little more firsthand knowledge of that agreement, to just describe that, and then I'll let Liz talk about it from the California Ocean Science Trust perspective. Does that sound okay?
Okay. So we did invite Liz, she's the executive director of the California Ocean Science Trust, to our December summit, our Ocean Science Summit. And from those side conversations and conversations we had at the summit, we thought about some of the mutual interests that cross one another, and the fact that we're dealing with one ocean, we're all on the West Coast. We're the only 2 ocean science trusts in the United States, and in fact in North America. And so is there some opportunity to find that commonality and talk about it and leverage it in a variety of ways? And that could be with our own legislators, it could be with the general public, it could be with federal legislators, it could be in a variety of different ways. It could be research topics that we're both interested in funding and advancing. And so what we did want to do was create this MOU not to bind us to one another, but to recognize some of that commonality and say, we've got some opportunities here. We need to keep looking for those opportunities. And when we find them, we need to take advantage of them and work together. And we're committed to doing that. So that's sort of the paraphrased version of the pretty document. And so Liz and Laura and I kind of cobbled it all together and we posted it on the website. It's been signed, so you can see it on the website. But really, it just talks about our mutual benefits and interests. that were interested in people and economies and tourism and all those types of things in ocean and coastal research. And the agreement says we're gonna look for opportunities, and when we find them, work together. So that said, I'll turn it over to Liz, maybe to share some perspectives you might have, Liz, and we can open it up for board discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to interject and just first by expressing my appreciation for the invitation to join you late last year for the research summit. It was just such a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with the Oregon Ocean Science Trust and with the Southern Oregon research community, many of whom are longtime friends and collaborators. And as Lisa already said, for me, it was a reminder that not only of our shared sort of mission and aligned purpose, as stated in our joint state legislative mandates, but also in how we're each sort of implementing and growing these organizations. It was also a reminder that we're actually at a very similar stage in one piece of it, which is the piece about how we use our unique position on the landscape to draw additional resources to the ocean science and research community, and that maybe there was opportunity to do that better together. And I hope this MOU is a starting point to that. I'll just note that it is a mechanism that we've used successfully in California. Just one example is that we signed an MOU with the California Department of Insurance. And it was that MOU that opened up some doors with philanthropic funders for us to pursue initiatives that we wouldn't otherwise have had the standing and the relationships to do. So I'm hopeful that this can do that in different ways for our two organizations. And I'll pause there. I'm happy to chat more, Lisa, about with you about ESP advisors and what they're going to do with us. But maybe I'll turn it back to you to kick that piece off, if that makes sense to the folk in the room.
Yeah, maybe any questions or comments that anybody has about the MOU before we start talking about ESP advisors? Okay. So one of the first steps that we've taken is that there is a great deal of interest for the OOST to honor its commitment to Oregon legislators that we would look for 3 legs of a stool to find funding to support ocean and coastal research. And so for 2 years in a row, or two legislative sessions, we did get funding from the Oregon legislature. And we've been working to try to figure out, okay, how do we build these other 2 legs of the stool, private donations and federal funding, to create a robust, sustainable, consistent stream of funding for ocean and coastal research. That's really the goal, so that we can ensure these long-term monitoring projects don't have big gaps, and so that we can address emerging ocean and coastal issues of importance to the people of Oregon. So Liz is also interested in California Ocean Science Trust seeking federal opportunities as well. And so one of the first things that we did is Liz set up a number of interviews with lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. And Liz and I interviewed them, and we had really good conversations, and they asked us questions, we asked them questions, and then we evaluated the content of those interviews in terms of what would serve our organizations the best. Which of the ones did we interview best understood us and could relate to our mission as a neutral, nonpartisan, science-focused group. And so of the ones that we interviewed, ESP Advisors was selected. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Liz, because you actually know a couple of those folks, but they do have science backgrounds. They are lobbyists, but they have ocean science backgrounds. And it's amazing how quickly they picked up on what we do. They understood it. They know our legislators in Washington, D.C., and they were already making connections for us as we were discussing in the interviews, ways we could help those legislators and ways that those legislators might be able to open doors for us. So it was super exciting. And we've signed a contract, but I won't go any further, Liz. I'll let you explain some of that maybe and your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And I'll just echo what you were saying about just this sense of understanding. And I certainly in California, I typically find myself having to explain the Ocean Science Trust 6 different ways before people have a moment of, oh, okay, that's what you do. Whereas these folk who have, one of whom is a Scripps alum, and they also work closely with the ocean observing community and some of the regional ocean councils, they sort of instantly got the value proposition, and they also understood where we sit in the landscape and the importance of things like our relationships with the university systems, and that we weren't trying to compete with university researchers, but rather work in a supportive, aligned fashion. It's just as a quick aside, their spring fellow working in their office at the moment, who will engage with us on our initial steps with them, is a woman who's just finished a Knaus fellowship with Jared Hoffman. And prior to that, we actually worked with her at UC Santa Cruz. So it truly is somewhat of a small world, even with those folk who make their way to DC. But from a very practical standpoint, what we also very much, I think, appreciated in our conversations with Emily and Kat is, and the other principals, is they had it wasn't just a dive in and go and start spending money and see where it takes us for DC. It was actually a stop and pause and let's plan and come up with a strategy and understand what it then takes to implement that strategy. I think for both of our organizations, we're conscious of the what a sustained implementation plan for anything we might do. So what we've entered into an agreement to do is a 3 to 4 month strategic planning, opportunity identification, and communications and implementation planning exercise. And I think that will equip both of us and us together to understand if and how and to what degree we want to move forward with more knowledge about what we're signing ourselves up for.
Thanks, Liz. Any questions or comments? And I don't see you, Keith, so I can't see. Let's see if I can't make this. I am not a Zoomer. There you are, Keith. Keith, do you have something you'd like to say?
Just quickly, I'm just looking this up again, and this is part of the Oregon Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Council, and I'm on that council through this board, through the Oregon Ocean Science Trust Board, and I'm just learning about what they're doing, and we have an opportunity to rewrite or write the next action plan beginning very soon. And one of the things that when I met with the folks, a couple of the folks leading that, was how they were able to expand their discussions and their alliances throughout the West Coast and on up to British Columbia. And I'm just looking again for the name of the groups there, because there's a number of groups that come to mind that we might do some outreach in, and be able to do that through the OAH group as well. And again, I'm just scanning down here because I don't have the notes in front of me, but there's a number of groups. Oh, here they are. The Pacific Coast Collaborative, the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, and the West Coast Ocean Alliance. So those three, and maybe folks know about those. Lisa, maybe the board has touched base with those groups before, but the one thing that I noted with the Acidification Council was that they had coverage that included British Columbia, Canada, Washington State, and those two are missing in our scope of our field of view here for the West Coast Ocean. So just my comment is that those groups exist, and through the Oregon Hypoxia and Acidification Council, if we can have discussions, I'll certainly bring them up about our reach and our breadth and our influence, and able to tie into what those funding sources are that they are using in Washington State, British Columbia, and combined how they're doing that along the West Coast, and be happy to report back to folks what I learned there.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, that's very helpful.
I just have a process question. So for the strategic planning with ESP, is it gonna be Lisa and Liz, are you guys gonna be the point people working with ESP, or do you want board involved, or like, yeah?
There will be board involvement for sure, and Laura is gonna be at the kickoff meeting.
Okay.
So definitely Laura's gonna be steering it from the OOST standpoint. My job is just always be in the background and helping to get the stuff done. So that's the case, and as soon as we get that first, whatever it is they develop for us, based on the initial conversation, we'll come back to the board with that, talk about it. And if there's a lapse in time, because it's only a 3 to 4 month contract, we'll make sure we get it to you via email for comment, or we can always do an impromptu schedule an executive meeting or something virtually between now and our next meeting.
Yeah, that's sort of, let's bookmark that topic of how we work as a board too, because we have, there's just some challenges with us not having staff, being a smaller organization, and the public meeting laws, and sort of like, how can we be a little nimble with interacting with some of these might be worth a little more discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna bookmark that because we don't have it on the agenda for today.
Thanks
Yeah.
for that.
And then on Liz's, on the California Ocean Science Trust side, Liz, is it gonna be you and your staff working with this, or what's the process on your end?
So it's principally going to be me, and there's one member of my staff who actually joined us from DC, who I may pull in as needed for just a second brain alongside, but otherwise I'm here for this engagement.
And then I guess for our board, do we see connections and crossover between our communications plan and this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and the fundraiser that we've got through that as well. So it's kind of all tied together for sure. Yeah, and navigating this without staff is a little bit trickier for us.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make it work. We're poking things to see, where we should and could invest time and what resources that we have to make this work for us.
But yeah, I mean, strategically, I think that's gonna be an important topic of conversation for the board, also for a relationship with host agencies and all that kind of thing. Yeah, if we're gonna grow, some things need to grow alongside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at least one would be good.
Yeah. Anything?
Other questions or comments? Well, Liz, thank you for participating today. And we'll see you on that first call with Laura in the next week or so, whenever that is, couple of weeks, I guess it is.
Sounds great. And yeah, happy to join today, and just very much looking forward to exploring with you all what the opportunities might be for mutual benefit for working together. And thank you for your interest in partnering.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Liz.
Liz. Okay, next I think you have some slides for me to help with this. So our next topic is, we had hoped we might come out with some more polished results from our Conversate workshop. We're not quite there yet, because we decided to have the communications team kind of work with us on it before we finalize and sort of have it as public facing strategy, tactics, documents. But I wanted to give a brief update so that folks who are joining us, and to remind the board kind of like where we landed on a few high level themes.
And I'm not going to put it in presenter view, just so that everybody can see it relatively big, if that's okay with you.
You mean online? Yeah.
So like in this room, they're going to see it big, but it's just, I'm going to keep the thing down the left-hand side, just so that everybody can.
Well, can the folks online see?
Yeah, they can see this.
Okay. Okay.
It's just not in presenter view.
Yeah. Okay. So, and how do I just use the down arrow? to advance it?
Yeah, you can just click on one of these.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, whoops, all right. Well, we can just go to the next one. So this is a sort of an overview of what we walked away with in terms of updating our mission statement. That was one of the focus areas that came out of our meeting. So this isn't the mission statement. Remember, we were going to have our communications team work on trying to get the wording to be pithy and sharp and easy to communicate with. But these are the themes that we wanted to see in the mission statement. So to secure and distribute funding is a priority. We've been talking a lot about funding. To focus on priority ocean and coastal knowledge, research, and monitoring, that those are the fundamental elements of what we're trying to do with the funding, is to develop those areas. And that the focus will be on the sustainable use of Oregon's coastal, ocean and coastal resources, that we work towards enhancing coastal resilience, supporting long-term ocean health, and that these are targeted to benefit all Oregonians, or all Oregon. So I think those elements are going to be woven into a less cumbersome set of talking points, but those were the high points that folks wanted to see. So we look forward to seeing what the team does with those bullets. The other priority that we came up with was that we really wanted to make sure our work integrated across biological, ecological, we came up with kind of this Venn diagram concept, that it's not just collecting the data, and that it's not just biological, that there's physical data that's needed. We heard a little bit about that with ground truthing today, and that the social and economic piece is important too, but that an often under-recognized part is the synthesis of the data and knowledge, and that needs to be funded and supported and communicated. So yeah,
I wonder if we might also consider in that center part something about monitoring, because that is a, kind of a common element, an important element that is kind of the front end to the synthesis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot more detail in notes, and this is just sort of like 30,000 foot view of what the,
I remember when we were talking about that, I wanted to bring it up. I don't think it was really discussed in this context.
Okay.
So now.
So you think it belongs in that center group space? Yeah, because it affects all of them.
Yeah.
Keith, I thought
No, I agree. And I think it does fit there, because in the synthesis of data and knowledge, not only would we be identifying areas of do a gap analysis, what we don't know, and what's crucial about what we don't know, what the priorities are, and then the value of continuing certain projects and data sets. And there'll be a subset of those that require that require a longer term and continuing monitoring to get us to answers and points where we can support decision makers, funding, and the communities as well.
And I guess I would add as a comment, I think, this may seem really simplistic and kind of obvious, but I think, the OOST was focused more on biological, ecological, maybe some complementary physical, and recognizing that we, at the summit, really came away with a clear picture of the need for transdisciplinary work. That's what this is sort of meant to represent in a snapshot. So I think, although this might seem like, we've been talking about it for a while outside of this room or this group, I think for the OOST, this is a recognition of our fundamental approach to science has shifted, and that we're reflecting that back in our work from what we learned in the summit. So I think that was that's how we can take this in part.
And I would just say that we clearly recognize that there's some things we need to avoid in terms of perception, and it's not reality, but it can be perception that we're doing research for research's sake. And that's certainly not the case. We're doing research to answer questions and then to provide I don't want to say recommendations, but provide the information that leads to actions. And it also, there's a part of that also, that research for research sake is something, and monitoring goes into on this. We had this discussion that these are often difficult discussions to have about the need for long-term monitoring. There's a pullback with that because it's expensive, and I think we as a community of scientists have not done a good job of explaining the need and value of doing that, and we need to do a better job at that, and making sure that we do explain that. And then it really works in our favor to do that when we're talking to people about supporting us and giving and providing additional support and funding, that we have clearly articulated that this research, the physical and biological research supporting social and communities, really is a much bigger picture than just the Venn diagram, that it has innumerable benefits to the public and to the science community.
Yeah, and I think I just moved the slide back kind of, Keith, also to reflect that, that's embedded, some of what you're pointing out is embedded in the elements of the mission statement. So those two slides are not really meant to stand alone, if you will. They're meant to complement each other and develop those ideas. Link them. And has the monitoring in there too, right? So. And then, let's see. The other things that came out that were really important high-level priorities were to focus on some of the really important impacts that are happening in the ocean right now. So, and this is just sort of take 3 quick bullets, like not trying to, the report I'm looking at, folks who participated in the summit who are sitting in the room too, like we have a huge document with like lists and lists and lists of all kinds of points. So we are trying to prioritize what are the most important needs and themes. And so carbon and heat impacts to the ocean. That encompasses everything from ocean acidification to the marine heat waves to a variety of factors that are impacting our oceans physically. The importance of sustainable food production and fisheries. So we've talked about that, the relationship to people, economy, sustenance, resilience. The importance of coastal and ocean development and how that impacts our relationship to coastal resources, people living along the coast, some of the impacts of climate also on that. So I think those are just to give you a sense, these are sort of top line priorities under which a lot of other things fit that were discussed at the summit, acknowledging climate, energy, essentially wind energy development, fisheries, species and habitats, knowledge and data gaps. Those are really high level important themes that OOST wants to address. So I'm going to stop. Any additional thoughts or comments from the board missing? Stop, Keith.
Ed, sorry, just one comment about coastal and ocean development. That is a priority, and it's where this work focuses for the main part, and our ocean communities are generally the first to be affected, but that doesn't mean that the inland part of this work doesn't redound. It does immediately. Seafood makes its way in across the country and across the world. It's not just the coastal communities that we're looking at in terms of where the work and everything's going to happen. It's going to happen, and then these natural pathways for the impacts, both the impacts and the benefits of a healthy ocean, again, redound throughout.
I think that's an important, I'll just take the moderator privilege here. I think that's a really important point. I almost wonder if that shouldn't be another bullet, the connection to people throughout the country and the state, to ocean resources and ocean health. That might be another just sort of communication point.
Yeah, I think we actually drafted a graphic during the workshop where we had people all of that was inside a bubble of people, and we had talked about the effects to people and the relationships and tendrils of each of those 2 people.
Yeah, I think it's like the effects of people, but also that the research should also focus on some of the human dimensions of as both.
Right.
how it impacts people, benefits, or for study for the human dimensions also.
Yeah.
Does this social side flow to the right of that list of the sort of research topic areas that these in some respect are pressures under the emerging priorities, and we see how they play through in in research in these different areas, ultimately to impact coastal communities, the state of Oregon, and the rest of the world. I mean,
I think that's what we said. I don't think it's captured in the slide
Yeah,
I
particularly.
like that slide
Yeah.
that you put together.
Yep.
we still have it. We just wanted to simplify
Yeah.
things for today. We've got the communications team looking at it to see if they can help us maybe split it out into a couple of different.
So that's the good segue to next steps. So this was just sort of a recap of what our workshop was, some of the high points, some of the themes that came out that were important, how we're starting to prioritize or group, merge some of the things from the research summit. And the next steps are to work with the communications team to have them help us put this into a format that is just pithier, clearer, not as scientist written. That's the way I'll put it. And then that will obviously come back to the board and we'll have conversations about what that looks like, what it's missing, what else we need before we go forward further. And I think that's, unless there's any more comments, I think that might be a good segue to our next, or do we have our
Yep.
colleagues?
So,
Okay.
Corey, I see that you're on. There you are.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So let me stop share so we can get a bigger picture of you. So I might just turn it over to you, Corey, to give us some updates and let us know what your folks are doing and engage with the board in some discussion about it.
Sure. So I think if I recall from the agenda, you're hoping for a little bit of a funding support update first, which maybe I'll start there and knock that one out because that one's shorter. So many of you had the opportunity to meet Shannon Brown at your workshop in Newport. Since then, Shannon's percolating on everything she heard there and is working on a fundraising plan. So that's kind of the next big step there. I don't have any fancy slides or anything to show on that front because that is in the works. So more to come there soon. What I thought I would do is put a couple of slides up for walking through some communications updates. But before I transition into that, Lisa, was there anything else you wanted to talk through on the fundraising side of things before I switch gears?
Just the fact that we realize the strong nexus between the communications work and the fundraising work. And so Shannon and I have been talking about that since the board workshop about how we take, thanks Kirsten, how we take a lot of what was said and distill it down in a way that people would potentially want to contribute private funding to the OOST or make it a package that would be appealing for federal funding as well as Oregon funding. But again, this focus on the other two legs of the stool as we move forward as well. I think that was it, Corey, Karina, or any other board members. Yeah, so go for it.
Okay, I'm going to screen share then and do the same thing you did, Lisa, but let me know if it's too small, especially for those who are in person.
Okay.
There it is.
You don't see it on this screen.
It's coming.
Oh, it's,
It's coming on the way.
no, sorry, I thought it was already up. That's why I was just.
Yeah, so Corey, if you'll just minimize towards the left, just make those slides a lot smaller. It'll make it much bigger for us in the room.
Did that do it better for you?
That's
Yeah,
great,
that's perfect.
Okay, awesome. Okay. Uh-oh, hold on. I've been using Teams all day, so this is my first Zoom meeting of the day. All right. So a couple of communications updates before I really get into this. The last time that I shared an update to the on the communications plan, introduced the communications team, I think there might be some new board members since then. Is that right, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
So we can go through a round of introductions, although we don't have cameras, but you can see them online as well.
Okay, that's true. And I can't see all of your faces, so I think I'll hear the names, but I won't be able to see you. So how about we start with me just at least introducing the communications and fundraising support team, so at least you all know who we are. And then I look forward to meeting all of you and seeing you face to face. Right now, Keith, you're the only person I can see, so good to see you again. So I just wanted to start there. So we have a team of 4, really working in close coordination across those of us who are more on the communication side of things, and then Shannon, who's coming in and bringing this fundraising lens as well. So really excited about that nexus, as Lisa said. So Nicole Schmidt with Sprout Partners is kind of our team lead. She's a graphic designer, and she's really bringing us together in terms of our visualizations for communications. Kayla Anderson with Riparian Media. She is a social media guru and has put together a great vision for OOST starting to wade into the social media world. I'm Corey Archer with True Wind Collaborative. For our team, I'm taking lead on communication strategy and legislative engagement. And then Shannon Brown, who again, many of you met, she's also with True Wind Collaborative, and she'll be taking lead on fundraising. So before I move on from there, we have 3 different firms, but we're working all together as one cohesive team. So whenever you're thinking communications team, it's kind of all of us lumped into one. Okay, so last time I shared an overview of the communications plan. Thought it'd be helpful to do just a really quick refresh of the overall objectives for the communications plan and then the audiences for those. So I won't go into as much detail as I did last time, but just a quick top hitters. So top objectives, we landed on 3. So 1, demonstrate value of state investments made to date, foster relationships with legislative champions, and elevate new research priorities for the upcoming biennium. Build understanding of why ocean science and research are important, specifically within Oregon. Enhance that coordination too on the regional message for West Coast ocean science. And drive donations to support the OOST via the Oregon Community Foundation. So those are our overarching objectives, and we have primary target audiences for each of those. So our first batch of primary target audiences are legislators, they're federal and congressional decision makers and agency funders, and private funders as well. So that's who we're really keeping at top of mind for our communications lens. But then there are also secondary target audiences that we can reach by following these same objectives too. So that's research partners, other ocean-focused nonprofits, and the emotionally invested public. So that's just my quick refresher on that front before I move into the actual actions and activities that we're starting to dig into, and then what is coming next as we move later into 2024. Any questions about the audiences or the objectives?
We're good in the room.
Good in the room? Okay. Lisa, I can't see the chat in my current screen share, so please don't hesitate to flag me down if you see anybody with their hand up.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so moving into the actual update on the activities that we've been working on. So one of our top things that we started with was starting to develop key messages for each of those primary audience groups, really thinking about what are those like FAQs? How would we tell the story of what the OOST is? I would call that done, but I will say, I think there's still a little bit of massaging to do on the mission, which is one of those key pieces of the key messages. So we'll keep working on that one too. Refreshing the website, that is happening now. So we've been working with Lisa on some ideas for how to bring in some of that new messaging, some of the OOST refreshed focus into the online space. Another thing we're tracking is the opportunity for doing a press release, probably sometime like this summer. What that could look like is launching essentially your new messaging around grounding what is the OOST, why ocean science is so important, particularly in Oregon. What are your big ocean research and funding priorities looking forward? And where can someone go if they're interested? I think one other layer to be thinking about here too is if there are some success stories to start to highlight from the research partners that you are funding, how can you elevate some of that and make it just that much more relevant in a press release? Okay, so this next one is a priorities communications packet. This is the one that we've been referencing to so far. So that's one of the next steps, and I flagged this one as, okay, maybe we're starting to feel a little bit more ready for this one. So this will be developing a high-level communications packet, can be handed out to research partners. You all can have it at the tip of your fingers. This is sharing the tailored set of key messages on how to talk about OOST. What are those ocean science priorities? Potentially a formula for writing project success stories. This packet is something that I see as multimedia. It might include a couple, like a one pager of here's what our priorities are. It might also include a couple of presentation slides that you can give to your research partners so that they can embed that and know how they can talk about OOST and make that connection on your behalf. Or for you to use and take onto your networks too. So another thing that we haven't started to wade into too much yet, but we are tracking the opportunity to join existing email newsletters. So this is working with other research partners or other ocean-minded entities that have their own networks and their own forums for sending out information. How can we just leverage that for passing along the message of OOST as well, or reaching an audience that way? And then the social media campaign is something that is ready to launch now. So this was something that has felt can be a little scary. Like, what does it mean to actually enter the social media world as a professional entity like the OOST is? So Kayla has put together an awesome first month of planned posts along that front. I might have to, unfortunately, I wanted to toggle, but I might have to stop my share, and then I want to show you just a couple of examples so you can see what that's starting to look like.
That would be great, Corey.
Okay. Don't want to do so much back and forth, but for some reason, it wouldn't let me just toggle on my tab. So I might have to do a screen share, take it down, and then put it back up. Sorry about that.
It's a Zoom thing.
It's a Zoom thing. Okay, so if you can see my screen again here. So this is and let me confirm. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this here is just a spreadsheet that is organizing the thoughts for each post that will launch over the next month. I think April 8th, so next Monday is going to be the very first OOST social media blast. 2 different platforms. So we're really prioritizing LinkedIn and we're prioritizing Instagram. So the overall goal for social media for the OOST is to establish professional credibility, be a source for sharing ocean research and science and information, and helping to encourage people to donate as well if they're interested, if they would like to. How can they do so? So we're really using that as kind of the grounding principles for social media. So what you see here is content along the lines of the LinkedIn platform. The way that they're themed is you start with an idea around, let's share content around who we are. We're the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. Our job is to promote scientific study that increases our knowledge about our ocean to inform sound policies and management. We're here to share facts, knowledge, and research about Oregon's ocean and coast. Welcome to our LinkedIn profile. It's setting the stage. And then from there, you can start to build in different theme type of topics. What do we do? Here's an example and some photos of us at work at our workshop. What were some of the outcomes of that? Why are we doing it? What are some of the things that are really driving OOST's mission? What's a current research project? Highlighting some of the work around ocean acidification and hypoxia. So here's where I have to stop my screen share, and then I'll put it back up and I'll show you a couple of images. But I wanted to at least show you all so you can truly and literally visualize what this will look like once it hits online. I think one of the concerns that I hear most often about social media, especially in the professional side of things, is not wanting to be too kitschy or not wanting to be too like flashy, seeking attention. So what we're really going for with the social media presence is something that does convey that professional lens. So for this first post that's introducing who we are, there's a series of pages here. So it starts with this one, you swipe and then you see, okay, we promote peer-reviewed science. Here's a simplified version of a question that we look at. We support ocean and coastal research by connecting researchers with grants that support coastal communities. We encourage collaboration and innovation to set ocean science and monitoring priorities that make sure funds serve the highest needs for Oregon. Welcome. Hope you like it here. And then from there, you have more coming soon over the next few days into the next week. So social media is all about building some of that layer. And it takes time to build an audience. So people won't always see this right off the bat, but this is the critical first step for putting a good first foot out there at least. So any questions, reactions to the social media side of things?
I think this looks great, and I like that first, who we are. I think that captures a lot of what we've been saying. I wonder, as we're still evolving our mission statement and that, will we be in sync, or will the need to feed content to the social media blast get ahead of where we are in terms of crystallizing our mission statements?
That's a great question, Corey. I'll toss that to you for you to share with us how you plan on navigating that. And before you answer that, just so you guys know, Corey and her team are kept literally up to date regularly. If you guys make a shift or you've changed new language or something, we're just feeding it to them and saying, hey, we just want you to know this is what the priorities are starting to look like. And so it's very close communication, but I'll leave it to you, Corey, on your end for how you're going to address that.
Yep. So having your mission statement really concrete is something that's particularly important for your website. So I see that as something that we're not going to be doing the major website update on that front until that mission statement feels really good. That social media piece that you just saw there, though, that connects so closely back to your official charge with the OOST. So we're talking, when I say official charge, I mean that you are promoting peer-reviewed competitive research. You're promoting innovative, collaborative, community-oriented, multi-institutional approaches to research and monitoring. You're enhancing the state's capacity for peer-reviewed science. You're also, subject to available funding, you're establishing and executing a competitive grant program. So those things aren't getting ahead of your skis. Those are what you do. What we're trying to work on too is when you memorialize it on your website, what is the best, most concise way to communicate that? So again, we're launching social media. We feel like those things are really in line with the pieces that aren't changing about OOST. So it's really about how we get that final 1 to 2 sentence mission statement memorialized from there.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Anybody have apprehension? Everybody feel okay about to dip our toes into social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, social media feels good. Corey, is any like earned media or like traditional media also part of, I just think, I think of like OPB focusing, they love ocean stuff, and underwater video is like so amazing. And so maybe that's too far in the future, like maybe that's down the road. But I'm just thinking, have you guys thought about traditional media or earned media or connecting with those kind of big, especially like television, Oregon-based television?
So I think step one on that front, sorry, I can't see your faces. Did I cut you off there?
Nope, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So one of the first steps in that, I think, is that press release. So how do we connect with outlets like OPB and others that are really in line and looking for stories on the ocean science front? So the print media, that's the place to start. That also can be picked up, in online articles as well. One thing we need to be a little bit slow about, like really just being realistic about the available resources right now, is how much more can we wade into more traditional media? What is the capacity for doing something like a series of videos? We came up with a couple of ideas in the communications plan that personally I think would be awesome for highlighting the OOST. But maybe that's not the highest priority for this, let's call it phase 1 of communications. One thing would be a series of videos that could be an interview with, or a series of interviews with industry and coastal community members. Things about showcasing stories from people who are observing changing ocean conditions. Maybe it's managers interviewed and what's some information that they feel like they need to make better decisions for the resources that they're managing, or someone saying, why is ocean health important to them? I see those kind of little videos as something that is really complementary to some of the other outlets that might pick up that kind of thing, but then also gives you more fodder to build your website, build your presence, and also give you something to communicate to legislators as well who are interested in what their constituents think about things.
Yeah, I didn't know
So-
like any like plans for snippets from the research we're funding, like out on the boat collecting data, or I know I came from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Marine Reserves program, and we had a very easy time getting media. They would love to come on the boat with the research, right? I mean, that's kind of easy to, but it's cultivating those relationships with the media outlets. So like that first step is the press releases and just getting our name out there and becoming kind of building relationships with some of the media outlets. And then maybe in the future, then it opens up opportunities for them to be wanting to come out on the research vessels with the fund project for funding. Or
Well, I think also some of the findings from the research projects as they start to come to conclusion. Could be turned into story pitches, and then it's not really on us per se, but it's like the media and the researchers working together, but that we kind of help pitch the, just give it, that's what I'm thinking, to make it more tractable for our capacity.
I think too, in terms of thinking about early successes on the research front, it may be early before we have results, but we have as a success the funding of very interesting and timely research. The two examples we heard today, talking about just the research that's being done, let alone, kind of what they found, I think is a valuable story.
One thing Lisa and I were coordinating on a little bit too is that as your as your funding recipients are reaching their reporting periods, we talked about how to get a question in the reporting survey, for example, that can encourage them to start thinking about what are those early successes, where are some places where the OOST was kind of instrumental in them being able to fully complete their work or to complete a stage of their work. Lisa, if I understand it, I think some of those are slowly starting to trickle in as they're on their timelines for reporting. Is that right?
That's correct, and we have added that question, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
let's see.
Yep, you should start to see them. We've got, I think, 2 more that are coming in.
They're kind of like testimonials almost, right?
A little piece of it is a testimonial. It's really the reporting requirement for the grant every 6 to 12
No, I
months.
know, but the answer to the question
Yes.
can be would be kind of in the form of a bit of a testimonial or messaging to the public about why it's so important, what gap the funding filled,
Yeah.
why it was important. Is that what you're thinking?
Or how the OOST made the difference.
Right, well, the OOST made the difference in that. Corey, is that?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. Without the eye contact, I can't quite tell.
Sorry, Corey, this is
yes.
like accurate sort of intention around some of that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it really depends on what kind of content we get back from the partners as well. Some people are hesitant to say, I've reached a milestone or I have a really success story right now, because they also don't want to minimize their work needing to continue and reach further milestones.
Yeah.
So I think we're, more in the stage where it's the art of trying to tease that out of people. And that can look a lot of different ways. It can look like a testimonial. It can look like hey, I discovered this kind of surprising thing. This might change my thinking as we move forward, or wouldn't this be interesting to explore? So, or it is saying even just gratitude for what OOST has done for their work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the next piece that I would hope to share for a little bit is an update on legislative engagement as well, and kind of looking forward into planning for this next biennium too. Are we ready to transition there?
Yes.
All right, we got Dick here, so he's ready.
We have a legislator in our room, Court. It's Senator Dick Anderson, and he does sit on our board.
Awesome. Hi, Senator. All right, let me get my slide back up here. I don't have too much to show on the screen, but we might as well look at this together, I think. All right.
We can see it.
Okay. All right, perfect. I can't see any of you anymore. I don't know what's going on with Zoom today, but I can hear you, so do flag me down. So the next piece of we're moving beyond just communications at this point. We're adding in that layer of legislative engagement. So one of the pieces that we're targeting is legislative work sessions, targeting the fall time, whenever that schedule opens up. So this is where we'll be presenting about the OOST and your priorities to at least one legislative committee if we can get on that schedule, and the Coastal Caucus as well before the governor's budget is finalized for the next biennium. So specifically, for those of you who are less familiar with the legislative world, that would be the House Committee for Agriculture, Land Use, Natural Resources, and Water, the House Committee, Climate, Energy, and Environment, and then the Joint Committee, Ways and Means, Natural Resources. So those are the places to start. One thing that I flagged here is that it's probably about time to start to get on that schedule because they fill up pretty soon. So even if we're not feeling totally ready for what that presentation would look like, who the right people to deliver that message could be, would like to see if you're amenable to at least starting to do some outreach and talking about getting on the calendar for scheduling a work session.
Thoughts? Everybody okay with that approach? Do we have the right?
I saw Keith's thumb up. How's the room looking, Lisa?
The senator's about to comment.
Well, I think you've got the committees, work well. I have to sit on the subcommittee of natural resources, and the full Ways and Means. And they're really, the Coastal Caucus is certainly a place to start first, I would think, and because those members populate other committees. But I'm also thinking of where I've had allies, and that certainly is the state agencies as well. To enter, so I wouldn't forget them because they put in, the state agencies would put a line item into their budget for those. As well as we would push for the Christmas tree bill on Ways and Means.
So we,
Oh,
go ahead.
no, I had a clarifying question. You just mentioned that the agencies might put in a line for OOST. Has that happened before?
I'm trying to remember where we initially got.
DSL. Because DSL is the only agency I can think of that would have done that,
Okay.
because we came under their umbrella.
So it'd be a pop under.
But I'm wondering if maybe a presentation to the governor's natural resource policy cabinet, which includes all the state directors.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
That's a good.
First step, yeah.
I did not quite hear that. Could you say it a little louder for me, Lisa?
Yeah, the governor's natural resource policy cabinet meets, and that's all the state natural resource agency directors. And it's actually a great forum to have informal conversation with them. I've presented to them before, and it's a really good opportunity. They can ask questions and.
Yeah, that kind of ties into something I was wondering, to what extent might OOST offer an opportunity for easy funding vehicle for our state agencies who might want to fund a project, but because of maybe their internal administrative burdens, that becomes cumbersome. But something like OOST maybe offers an easier pathway to manage the money as well as, so that may, I don't know whether that is within the box that we can color, let alone how we do it, but it might represent another funding revenue stream.
I mean, I think the other thing to be mindful of is coordination with the agencies and their own initiatives and budget requests, and that our work is complementary and not competitive. I'm trying to be sensitive to that sort of dynamic as well.
But it's not all about, money. You
Right.
go through Ways and Means. To me, since we're early in the process, I would informational
Briefing.
briefings is good. And that's even later in the session after all the work's been done, or even in the early part before the bills are coming. Just an update on where the money has gone, how it's used so far, would help reinforce, especially a 160-day session, and we remember.
Right.
So I think there's lots of avenues, but I'm envisioning more than just an ask for money, it's information and why.
The value
Yeah,
proposition
yeah.
and
Right,
mission.
and who we partner with to get that money out the door and get those projects done, like ODFW and Sea Grant and whoever it is.
Thank you, that's helpful for us.
Keith?
Yeah, I've got two that I'd like to just put in here. One would be the federal government and finding a way to coordinate or and inform so that we have at least a touchstone on the BIL and IRA monies. Those are significant funding sources, and that money is making its way out here to the coast in many positive ways. I'm on the NOAA Marine Carbon Removal Project, carbon dioxide removal project, and I bring that to the Oregon Acidification and Hypoxia Council. But I think that we should at least talk about. I don't know the pathway yet, and I don't know how OOST fits in terms of the legislation, what it will allow and what it doesn't allow in terms of accessing federal funding support. So that's one. The second one is I think we need to find a way to involve the tribes. I think traditional knowledge and the coastal tribes, especially, and other tribes, is long history, time immemorial, and recognizing that the land acknowledgements of the coast and those resources, and having those folks as advocates, as advisors, is something I think we should not miss out on.
So Keith, are you suggesting that our legislative engagement piece, we might try to think about ways to incorporate connecting with tribes on that piece of it? And I only ask that because from a government to government relations standpoint, I've always struggled a little bit with how a nonprofit based organization does that with that required government to government piece, but I would just not have the understanding.
Yeah, I worked for the tribes for 14 years, and they do interact with NGOs, and they do it well. And the tribes that engage, I think, do it well, and those groups do have very good relationships with the tribes. And I think that it would be a mistake for us not to find a pathway for that. The federal, and so think of them as sovereign nation. Think of them as a sovereign nation, and think of them like we would think of the federal government as well, as opposed to state. So that triad is a pretty powerful triad to at least make sure that we touch those points and challenge ourselves to see if we can find pathways into discussions with them at the very least. And with the federal government, we'd be looking at those funding opportunities. Those NOFOs that come out, notice for funding opportunities, are open to NGOs. I just submitted a $5 million one as an NGO. And so.
Keith, as you know, submitting grant proposals is a big proposition. I'm gonna comment on that.
Yeah.
So it's a big undertaking, in managing it. So I'm just not sure, I'm not clear if we have it's more a capacity question to do that.
And it may be so that project sponsors may be looking at that as in-kind funding or matching funding as well. And so, our ability to encourage that, and I think maybe something that we can look at that's downscaled from agreed. And I'll just say, Karina, the grant that I submitted was NOAA Sea Grant. So, and yeah, it was a lot of work,
Yeah,
but it was it was well worth it. It was well worth it. It's the right stuff.
So, Corey, we might toss it back to you to consider Keith's comments and how that might play out in this broader plan you're talking about, whether it's a part of that legislative engagement or someplace else where we can plug and play that.
So, I mean, I think what Corey was presenting is really state.
Yeah.
Right.
First of
Well,
all, so
like
to be
the-
clear.
Yeah.
But I think there's an interest in the state of where those funds from the feds are going, and not all of them have been designated and allocated yet. I'm just thinking about the Coastal Resilience Climate Challenge. I know folks have proposals in, they're being reviewed still. There are other competitions that are still not resolved and finalized yet. So, but I think the fact that we would know about those and maybe invite someone to present as part of a briefing so that people could see the connectivity, that might be, at the state level, might be an opportunity right there. And just let me put my other thought out and then I'll shut up. But the other thing I was thinking about, and Keith, this is almost a question to you, given your history of involvement with the tribes and sort of, would it be appropriate as part of our outreach briefing to try and build a relationship, to do a presentation, a briefing to tribal councils or something like that?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the first step and that's the right step.
So,
maybe the Oregon State or the Oregon University of Oregon group that comes together with many of the
climate.
tribes, the
yeah,
climate.
Kathy Lynn, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's not tribal council, that's different.
yeah.
That's tribal staff participating in those if they are, so tribal council is government. That's the governance.
Well, I'll
body.
leave that to you and Laura to
Yeah.
figure out how we
Yeah.
navigate that.
And,
No
and
problem.
certainly may at that government level, that would be the outreach, but we may be talking to the natural resources people and departments, those shellfish people and those fishers and those managers.
But they also need the blessing of their council to do the.
They do that. It would go council first.
You know, I'm reminded that, you know, we have in May, September, and December legislative days, which committees meet, and those are great opportunities to be informational forums. And again, depending on when you're ready and what you have, so there's.
May, September, and December, you said?
Pardon?
May, September, and December?
Right.
I'm curious from a board perspective, would any of you be interested in or have the capacity to participate in one or more of those legislative days? You know, any kind of a presentation to the governor's cabinet?
Yes, I'm.
Okay, so Kristen would, Corey? Just wanna see if, and Keith would. Okay, and I know you're.
I'm
you have
kind
this-
of conflict of commitment,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit.
With
to-
secret.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So we've got a couple of board members, and maybe as these opportunities present themselves, we can put the opportunity out to you, and if any of you feel comfortable or want to engage doing it, we can get your help.
I will say that you as board members are inherently going to be the best communicators and champions of the issues and priorities of the OOST. One thing I would think too is that you might realize that you're that right messenger as you really get clear on your priorities as well. So Lisa, I would encourage that as those conversations continue and as things really solidify there, maybe asking that question again.
Okay.
Could be helpful. If I could just add some thoughts to consider too. So I heard probably like 85% of the conversation in the room, I feel like. So Senator, it sounds like you have some really solid ideas. And Lisa, perhaps I can follow up with you on some of those specific opportunities so we don't miss those threads. But a couple of the ideas that I heard there too were, well, a couple of things. One being, well, what if OOST helped to fund agencies or partners that couldn't get their funding in their own agency budget requests? Another was, how can we be more coordinated with agencies that are also submitting? And then Keith, you mentioned too, how can we be engaged with the tribes? Maybe there's some opportunity there for having better understanding of what work in ocean and coastal research tribes are doing on the staff level. And also where could there be some integration with actual like OOST communications on funding? In terms of so the first two, being in coordination with what other agencies are doing and then helping to fund some of those gaps. There is a model that you can look at in Washington. So your northern neighbor, the Marine Resources Advisory Council does something similar. I facilitate that group and have done that biennium process with them for several cycles now, where they do just that. They seek to understand what their other partners are doing, agencies, and what requests they're doing in terms of ocean acidification work. And then we ask other partners who cannot get their priority funded after we've done a priority assessment cycle. So that typically looks like the MRAC, which in this case would be the OOS, submitting a request to the governor's budget on behalf of that entity. And there is a way to do that kind of funneling. So I just want to say that there may be something for you to consider there. If you start to hear, and once you get solid on what your priorities are, if you realize that's already baked into other agency budget requests, maybe that's not something you need to prioritize for yourselves funding. And then focusing on those gaps instead. So just wanted to share that piece there. And then for coordination with tribes as well, there may be some intertribal organizations that you could speak to. I would think that the staff level would probably be a good and appropriate place to start in terms of finding opportunities for research to fund as well. So there may be just people who are interested in pursuing the OOS grant opportunities once those are available. So that's just kind of my brain dump in response to some of the things that I heard in the room over there.
Thanks, Corey. Ted?
With regard to speaking to other state agencies about, you know, what we're doing and what we can do and whether we have, to what extent do we need to say front load that conversation or preview that conversation with people in DSL so that we don't sort of speak for DSL without DSL. I don't know whether because we are a part of DSL, sort of. I don't know. Are there
Not a project of them or anything.
So there's no third rails where we might, you know, sort of get ahead of our skis, to use the metaphor that was used before, in terms of how this, you know, state agency to state agency. Sometimes there can be, you know, issues.
Yeah, we're really not a project of DSL, like South SLU. They're really serving as our fiscal sponsor. Yeah. And we've been talking with them, and we'll talk as a board at our next board meeting. We have it on the agenda as a big item of how we need to morph into something different that helps DSL and helps us with our capacity and management issues. Corey, anything else for us?
I think this was the heart of my update. Thanks for letting me share that with you all. And thanks for the good ideas and stuff too. So Lisa, I'll follow up with you, make sure that we have those particular engagement opportunities tracked.
Yes, and Corey, when we get together, remind me to talk to you about the URL on the social media slides. It's not correct.
Well, let's fix that. That sounds good.
I just wanted to flag it because April 8th is around the corner and we want to get that fixed before we launch.
I'll pass that on to Kayla right after this.
All right. Hey, thanks for your help.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I am not going to stick around for too much longer, but please feel free to get in touch via Lisa if you have any questions or want to talk about anything else, communications. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Corey.
Okay, we are ahead of time now.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is great. So let's see, our next item up is public comment. But just before we go to that, are there any sort of final remarks from the board around anything you've heard so far? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and open up to see if there is any public comment? I'll let Lisa, can you handle that?
Yeah, if anybody would like to make public comment, if you would let me know in the chat box and I will recognize you, that would be the best way to do it. And I'll make sure you guys get copies of whatever came out of the chat in terms of comments and stuff, just so that you can see them.
Perhaps there were people.
Yeah,
Listening things.
I think Keith sent some things and.
Anyone in the room? I guess there's one member of the public here. Brad, did you want to say anything?
No.
You don't have to. I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
while we're waiting for anybody to type in, we are going to do some additional outreach relative to notifying people about our board meetings. So I think you may see a significant difference at the next board meeting. And we have asked for a room at the new facility, better capacity and internet, so I think that's taken care of.
Yeah, I noticed and I asked, that our meeting information is going out through Department of State Lands. But I think a significant fraction of the Ocean Coastal Community Policies or folks are on the DLCD, Ocean Info listserv. So we just want to make sure we rebroadcast there. If you have other ideas, I think there are other entities that would be happy to kind of just at least share the meeting announcements and the agenda so that people are there.
No public comment?
I do have a question
Yeah.
that ties back to an earlier part of our.
Yeah, we have time,
conversation.
so let's.
At the end of our workshop, toward the end of our workshop, we started to look at a list of the issues that would go, items that would be related to the grant review process. I know I don't have the right, quite using the right words. And then we were going to follow up and start to narrow that list or prioritize that list. I'm just curious
Grant
where.
review process or request for.
The criteria to rank
The
proposals
Ah,
when we
okay.
do
Thank
competitive
you.
grants.
Okay.
And so what we had started to do was develop a survey. And we were gonna put it out through a survey along with some of the graphics that Karina showed you today. But we decided not to do it in a survey format and combine all those graphics with that piece of it. So with your and Laura's approval, what we might do is send out the survey just on the criteria alone. So there were like 26 of them. And we want you guys to tier them. We just want you to say,
The buckets.
of these 26, these top 10 should be considered. These are the top 10. So we'll get that out to you.
Okay,
We haven't lost it.
yeah, great, because I just didn't, yeah.
Yeah, the survey is actually done and ready to go, so I'll hit go
Yeah,
tonight.
we had a
It's
little
okay with you.
commentary there.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder though.
The other thing when if you're doing this is a little random notes, the URL, getting the URL correct for the social media launch.
Yes.
Also, I noticed, I've noticed that there are sort of 3 points of access to OOST online. There's the DSL
DSL.
website,
Ours.
and there's one more. It's DSL2, I think, but there's like 3.
Is it the Oregon Ocean Info?
Oregon Ocean Info where it says hit this button and then I think it brings you to DSL and then DSL and then there. And our meeting, there's meeting information, definitely DSL has it, but it's showing up sort of, but not up to date somewhere. Anyway, I think that landscape needs to be reviewed.
I'll get with Linda on that.
Yeah.
When we first started this, we pulled a bunch of the content that was on DSL's website and we housed it on our new website. And if we might be at the point now where we've been in existence long enough doing some things that we can ask DSL if we can just pull it all into our site and call it good. Because everything that's on their site
Right,
is on ours.
right. You're right. So do we need to be managing 2 front pages? I guess that's, if there needs to be a reference, I think that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
Here's an organization, DSL support, you can
Yeah.
go there for the details.
For years, they had it on DSL because we didn't have a website at all.
Right.
So I'll get with Linda and.
I just think it's
talk about it.
confusing for folks trying to look at us and see what we do.
Yeah. Website. Okay. Anything else, Keith? Anything else for the good of the order? All right,
All right,
meeting adjourned.
meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Karina. Thanks, Keith.
Well done.
Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Nobody
Thanks,
Thanks,
minds-
everybody. Have a great
Yeah,
day.
It's our internet.
Yeah. Nobody minds when the meeting ends early.
Yeah.